Network begins. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network begins in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network begins in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show begins in 5 seconds.
Morning, glory, America, bonjour, hi, Canada, greetings, Israel, and to my friends in the PRC who are always listening, hello to you as well. I am in the land. I am in Cleveland. Happy to be here. At a great event last night with Seb Gorka and Peter Kirstenau and our friend Bob France. Bob confessed error. He was, he's he's taken the side of Sam Darnold since he was drafted by the Jets and wished moaning and groaning that he'd been drafted by the Browns. And Peter Kirsanow confirmed my story last night. I was there. He was there. We all heard that. But then we got Bob to revoke his support for Mason Randolph, who provoked Myles Garrett. But, of course, the NFL commissioner, being the NFL commissioner, he did the wrong thing, suspended the young man whose outburst, Myles Garrett, was totally out of character for the entire season, made him beg in the offseason because he's not a quarterback. He's not named Tom Brady, who can cheat and only get 4 games. And he's not Mason Rudolph, and he's not a Steeler. So he got the book thrown at him because that's what the commissioner does. He hates the Browns. It's just part of what happens. So we were groaning and moaning through Barbecue Brew and Hugh, through the VIP dinner, through the big event with Fred. It was a great event, though. We covered everything under the sun, and not without dissent. I want people to understand within the family, we just argue. I don't think there's a deep state. Seb Gorka passionately thinks there is a deep state. And we argued about that last night. Here's what I love, though. When Seb is explaining, so Hugh, there is a deep state. Some listener says, Hugh doesn't want to lose his Democratic friends, sneering. And Seb leaps to my defense. And this poor guy looks just stunned. Hugh Hewitt's done more for the Supreme Court, blah, blah. And I said, thank you, Seb. That was nice. That's what happens. That's the way conservatives should be. You can disagree, but stand back to back. Don't go all crazy, shoot at the inside the tent stuff. That's what I hate about the conservative movement. And there's been a lot of it since Trump won. Keep an eye on the fact that Mitch confirmed 8 district court judges yesterday. Keep the eye on the ball that nothing happened in the impeachment sham show shift trial yesterday. We're where we are, wasting time, getting nothing done. USMCA, which would benefit greatly numbers of Americans. Just remember the Democrats held it up. They kept you from selling your farm product farmer. They kept you from selling your automobiles. They're killing you, workers of America. The Democrats are killing you. They're just killing you. Just keep that in mind. Now, I did appeal to the audience on one thing, which I want to talk to you about up front. Chick-fil-A inexplicably has dropped the Salvation Army because of their alleged, by radical activists, anti-LGBTQ position, which is just not true. Salvation Army put out a statement yesterday that was saddened to learn that a corporate partner felt it necessary to divert funding to other hunger education and homelessness organizations, areas in which the Salvation Army is the largest social services provider in the world is already fully committed. The Army went on to note, we serve more than 23 million individuals a year, including those in the LGBTQ plus community. In fact, we are the largest provider of poverty relief to the LGBTQ plus population. The statement acknowledged that Chick-fil-A has received pressure over its traditional Christian beliefs, but they point out they serve everybody. So I told you yesterday on the show that Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I doubled our donation this year from last year. And a lot of people promised to do the same thing. And we opened up the campaign for the Salvation Army virtual red kettle at HughHewitt.com a week early because of this. We got to make up a lot of money. Chick-fil-A contributed a lot of money. And that's money that, Chick-fil-A keeps. I don't know, maybe they'll give it away to, something like the Southern Poverty Leadership Center or some crazy left-wing group. Chick-fil-A goes PC. I'm not going back into Chick-fil-A. You throw out the Salvation Army, you become like Target. You're dead to me. The Salvation Army does the most for the most good for the most people in America. There is no question asked. The New Republic put it on the cover of their magazine. It's the most effective anti-poverty organization in America. They never give up on anyone. They never give up on anyone. They don't care if you're gay, lesbian, transgendered. They don't care if you're white, black, brown, polka dot, checkered, square. They don't care if you're an illegal immigrant. They just take care of you. They are the gospel. And that's why we doubled our donation. And that's why I'm asking you to go right now to HughHewitt.com. I'm going to ask you again and again and again. At the top of HughHewitt.com, you will find a virtual red kettle. It says, "'Tis the season to help those in need." Donate to that online red kettle. There's no place to leave a message. We've already got 80 people stepped up yesterday. George Griffin donated $100. Denise Derbyshire donated $208. Kathy Johnson, $25. Carl Doreen Catlin chipped in. That I haven't seen Carl open his wallet ever. Have you, Dwayne? You ever seen Carl open his wallet?
That's actually a pretty dangerous place to be. It's between Carl and his wallet.
Yeah, he's never lost his wallet, but it must have been Doreen that did it.
I'm sure it was.
Mikhail, with whom I sat at dinner last night, one of the most interesting guys. Mikhail donated $50. Thank you, Mikhail. Peggy Ann Buckingham, $100. John Straggy, thank you. There's another. It's like Carl. Linda Johnson, Barbara Carson, all these people. I need thousands of you. I know how many people listen to the show. Millions of you listen. We have to make the Red Kettle this year. We have to send a message to Chick-fil-A. And feel free to walk into Chick-fil-A, tell the people, I'm not buying anything. I'm here to tell you I'm not coming back. I'm here to tell you, I don't know what you call yourself a Christian organization and you abandon the most Christian organization. And I know Dan, the owner, he's a great man. I've always held them up as being, they're the people we rallied around when they were in trouble. That's what we did. America rallied around Chick-fil-A when it was in trouble, when the left tried to purge them. And now their new CEO says, no, we're not working with the Salvation Army. I'm shocked. I'm appalled. They are ashamed of the gospel. That's got to cut. That's got to hurt, Dan. I know it. That's got to hurt. But I am not ashamed of the gospel. I am not a member of the Salvation Army Church. I'm Roman Catholic, right? I ask you for food for the poor in the summer when they're feeding Haiti or there's a disaster. But at Christmas time, it's the Salvation Army. So I just would love for you to go off and do the Salvation Army. I got a lot to do today. And I'll tell you about the Salvation Army more and more. But I want to get a little of my business done early in the day. I want to remind you that A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood opens today. It's rated PG. Learn more at beautifulday.movie. Beautifulday.movie. It's the Fred Rogers movie with Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers. It's going to be terrific. It's going to be wonderful. Everyone go to it this weekend. Just have a great time. Also got to warn you that the Red Chinese, the Chi-Coms, General Secretary Xi, not happy with the United States over the Hong Kong Freedom Act passed by the Congress almost unanimously. One knucklehead said no. I don't know who it was. But that means they're upset, and that means markets are roiled, and that means you ought to be diversified. You know, some people have a house, and some people have some savings, and some people have some stock, and some people have some bonds. What you also need is at least some gold and silver in your safety deposit box. Hard metal never goes down in a panic. And Birch Gold Group is the place to do that. And the way to get it done is to go to hughgold.com, HUGHGOLD, hughgold.com. They'll also send you a free kit on how you can turn some of your retirement. You got a 401k, you got an IRA, you can turn some of that into a precious metals-backed gold and silver IRA. It's the safest one around. It will be absolutely wonderful for you. But trust, you know, got to be careful who you work with. Birch Gold has thousands of satisfied customers, countless 5-star reviews, A+ rating from the Better Business Bureaus. I've talked to them. I know what they're doing. So protect yourself, protect your family, hughgold.com. Finally, in the work department, I want you to realize that when I recommend andrewandtodd.com, I don't always do so because they pay me. I do so because they're wonderful mortgage lenders. When I recommend the Wild Adventure, twa.us, I do so that you don't get mad at me. All right? The Wild Adventure sells out every year. The best fly fishing adventure in the world for 12 men at a time. Go to twa.us and sign up. It sells out every January. And then people are mad at me that I didn't tell them about it. So in December, they just opened registration. I'll run some ads for them in a little bit, but they're not paying me to say this. Jan Janur has been my friend for a long, long time. He organized this. He's been leading 5 fly fishing trips for men for 40 years. And they go up and they read Wild at Heart. They have some great conversations. There's stuff you never get to talk about. What went right, what went wrong with your life. Not church, not a retreat. It's fly fishing. Terrific time in the wilderness of Montana. It's probably the best week of your life. I've gone 3 times. Generalissimo went. He was thrown out of the Wild Adventure. He hooked the guide 8 or 9 times. It was terrible. No, he wasn't. He loved it. He had a good time. You had a good time, didn't you, Dwayne?
Well, yeah, once I got out of jail.
Yeah, that's... But it's a good time, right? It's a fantastic time.
It is a lot of fun. It is. It's everybody goes up there not knowing what to expect, but by the time they leave, they're glad they did it.
Did you catch any fish?
Oh, I caught a ton of fish.
No, you didn't.
Well, then why did you ask me?
I just wanted to see if you were still telling fish stories. The Wild Adventure, TWA.US. Go watch the testimonials. You'll sign up, take a friend, change your life. I'll be right back, America. Yesterday was the silliest doggone day in the hearing because people think that two countries can't interfere in our election. Here's the bottom line. Russia attacked us. Ukraine interfered. They both did it. There's no inconsistency. The left goes crazy when they hear about this, but it is indisputable. Read the Politico article from January 11th, 2017. I'll tell you about it next.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
America, early one morning, I was looking at the Democrats and saying to myself, they will never change. There can be red, gold, brown, white, whatever. They're just never going to change. They refuse to read history. I have in my hand a Politico article from January 11th, 2017, published at 5:05 a.m. by Kenneth Vogel and David Stern. This is a week before President Trump is inaugurated. Headline, Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. Subhead, Kiev officials are scrambling to make amends with the president-elect after quietly working to boost Clinton. First graph. Donald Trump wasn't the only presidential candidate whose campaign was boosted by the officials of a former Soviet bloc country. Second graph. Ukrainian government officials tried to help kill Hillary Clinton and undermine Trump. Got that? Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Clinton and undermine Trump. And it goes on. You can look it up. This article just drives the resistance crazy because it proves the president had a well-founded belief of Ukrainian meddling in the election. And indeed, Ken Starr, who's been on Fox a lot, said this. Cut number 8. Ken Starr sums it all up better than I did yesterday. Cut number 8.
But this still doesn't go, truly the final point, to exactly why were those Ukrainian officials doing the things that they were doing. And to simply dismiss it as irrelevant strikes me as willful blindness to the entirety of the picture as seen from the mind of the President of the United States.
Willful blindness. Now, Judge Starr, who I knew him as a federal judge when I was a young OPM general counsel, and he'd come over and swear in senior executive service people. I've known him for 40 years. Wonderful man. And he's very fair. There is Ukrainian meddling in our election. By the way, the Russians attacked our election far more pervasively, thoroughly, and with sophistication, but the Ukrainians meddled as well. The Russians meddled to hurt Hillary. The Ukrainians meddled to help Hillary. Donald Trump wants it all investigated. And some of his theories don't make a lot of sense to me, like CrowdStrike. I don't get that at all. But that's the baseline. Now we go to Fiona Hill, who indulged in a lot of showmanship yesterday. Really, I think she's very smart, she's very competent, and she's very eager to get back to Brookings and be part of the club. Cut number 1.
For the best part of 3 decades, I've built a career as a non-partisan, non-political national security professional focusing on Europe and Eurasia, and especially the former Soviet Union. I've served our country under 3 presidents, in my most recent capacity under President Trump, as well as in my former position under my former position of National Intelligence Officer for Russia and Eurasia under Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. In that role, I was the intelligence community's senior expert on Russia and the former Soviet republics, including Ukraine. It was because of my background and experience that I was asked to join the National Security Council in 2017. At the NSC, Russia was part of my portfolio, but I was also responsible for coordinating US policy for all of Western Europe, all of Eastern Europe, including Ukraine and Turkey, along with NATO and the European Union. I was hired initially by General Michael Flynn, Katie McFarland, and General Keith Kellogg. But then I started work in April 2017 when General McMaster was the National Security Advisor. I, and they, thought that I could help them with President Trump's stated goal of improving relations with Russia, while still implementing policies designed to deter Russian conduct that threatens the United States, including the unprecedented and successful Russian operation to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. This relates to the second thing I want to communicate. Based on questions and statements I've heard, some of you on this committee appear to believe that Russia and its security services did not conduct a campaign against our country, and that perhaps, somehow, for some reason, Ukraine did. This is a fictional narrative that has been perpetrated and propagated.
Stop. She should have been stopped right there. I don't know one Republican who doesn't believe Russia attacked our election. Period. Full stop. End of story. I've been saying it since 2015. WikiLeaks was a Russian front, and every member of that committee knows it. But she said, you're conflating it with Ukraine. No, we are not. You can hold two thoughts. She lost her credibility with me right there. Explain the Politico article. Explain Chalupa. Explain all this. You don't have to be a nutter. You just have to read. And she is purposefully, perhaps in her larger crusade against Russia, which I applaud, distorting the fact of Ukrainian interference. And the left goes crazy because it's true. Ukraine did meddle. And because they meddle, there's a predicate for Donald Trump's suspicion. So they have to denounce it continually. I'll come back and do the movies with Sonny Bunch because it is Friday. We do need to relax. Stay tuned, America.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Joined now by Tarzana Joe.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break. 5 seconds.
That's an easy question to answer from the ReliefFactor.com studio in Cleveland. Sonny Bunch will stop the rain. He is the film critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show. You follow him on Twitter at Sonny Bunch, and he brings sunshine to our Friday every day of the year, every Friday of the year. Hello, Sonny.
Hey, Hugh. How's it going?
I've got sunshine in my heart because you're on the radio.
Excellent. That's great. You know, as the preeminent Hugh Hewitt guest, I take my duties very seriously here.
I told the audience that last night in Cleveland, and they couldn't believe it. I said, nope, he scores higher than anybody. His Q is the highest of any guest.
You know, it shocks me, too, because I'm a stumbling, mumbling mess most of the time, but I'm glad that the people are able to stick with me. I appreciate that. And I feel a little bit, I need to explain myself to the audience today, all right? There are three big movies out.
You're not going to slag a beautiful day, are you?
The first is Frozen 2. This is the biggest. This is going to gross $100 million this weekend. I have not seen it yet. I've not seen it yet because I have a 4-year-old girl. And if I went to go see Frozen 2 without my 4-year-old girl, yeah. I would not be allowed back into the house. So
no, that's a pass. You have amnesty.
I have to say, I will say that I was discussing with Dwayne before the segment that Frozen has been playing on a loop in my house for the last 2 years.
Yeah, amnesty. You are pardoned.
Okay. And I also have not seen Mr. Rogers. Golly.
A
Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And again, I need to explain myself here. Because this is the sort of movie that, look, I actually am very much looking forward to this movie. I love Tom Hanks. He's America's dad. I love Matthew Rice. He was of course the lead on The Americans, the great FX Soviet spies in America drama. Chris Cooper's in it. He's fantastic. I love it. I love everybody in this movie. I have not seen it because it's the sort of thing that definitely 100% will make me cry at the end of it. I know this.
Yes.
This is just the Mr. Rogers effect. And I cannot be made to look foolish in a theater as an important guest on the Hugh Hewitt Show. And
it's okay. My good long-term partner John Yeager cries at the old Kodak commercial. I don't care if men cry.
I can't. In a theater setting with God only knows who watching, I can't do it. So that's when I'm going to be. That's when I'm going to assert some critic privilege on. And,
no amnesty for that.
My year-end screener.
You're the only movie critic I know who has no movies to review.
No, but I do. 21 Bridges. 21 Bridges. That's what we're talking about this week.
Very cool. I like the trailer. Tell us about that.
So I've seen this trailer. I don't know if you've seen this trailer, Hugh, but I've seen this trailer approximately 300 times.
You and me both.
Over the last 6 months. It seems
8
to be
cops,
playing,
21 bridges, 3 tunnels, shut them all down, right?
Exactly. It is playing in front of every movie, at every movie theater. It stars Chadwick Boseman, who you probably best know as Black Panther from the Marvel movies, and it is produced by the Russo brothers, who we all probably best know as the directors of the last 2 Avengers movies. But this is not a Marvel movie. It is an original film, an original script from an original concept. Chadwick Boseman is a detective in the New York City Police Department who his father was killed in the line of duty. His father was a cop. He was killed in the line of duty 20 years before this movie starts. And it turned him into the cop who gets the criminals who kill cops. That's like his shtick. He's the one they call in when something bad happens on the force. And something bad has happened on the force this night, Hugh. There was a drug robbery gone bad as 8 cops were killed by a pair of drug dealers as they tried to escape a drop spot for a big bunch of cocaine. So the movie is very tight and very contained. It takes place over the course of one night as these 2 criminals try to get away, and Chadwick Boseman's detective tries to figure out exactly what has happened and what the dirtiness level, shall I put it, of the cops involved. So here's the thing: is I like this movie a fair amount, but I can only really like it for the following reason: is that it is completely and utterly predictable from start to finish. It's a thriller without any thrills, which is a problem. It's a minor problem, but it is a problem. The thing about this is, on the one hand, we live in an age where it is nice to get something that is not a tentpole comic book franchise picture, right? It's something that we're always talking about. We want more. We want more original films. We want more, just stuff that we haven't seen before. But the problem is we have seen this before. It's like a real, and I say this in the nicest way possible. I don't want this to be taken as a huge slam, but it is like a very well done episode of Law and Order, SVU, or NYPD Blue. I mean, it is very much kind of filled with cliches, and but it looks great. It looks great on the big screen. New York City looks very dark and scary at night, and the actors are all pretty good. Chadwick Boseman is a bit of a stiff here, but he's playing a character who's a bit of a stiff, so I'm not entirely sure how much to blame on him. Sienna Miller plays his partner. She's assigned to him to help figure out where these drug dealers are off to, and she's great. J.K. Simmons, who everybody knows.
I love J.K. Simmons. He went to Ohio State. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
That's why you should know that. If you're a film critic, you should know that J.K. Simmons went to Ohio State.
You should know that because you're an Ohio person.
Now, honestly, I got to go back, though, to giving you a pass on Frozen. I didn't do the test. The test. Can you sing "Let It Go"?
I can.
Can I hear a few bars, please?
I'm not going to, Hugh.
Just a few bars to prove your cred.
No.
Can we bring it up? It'll make it easier on him if we can bring it up, friend.
No.
Yeah.
I'm with Sonny on this because that song is genetically wired into female DNA. Guys don't know the lyrics to that song.
No, he's lying to us. He's saying he's got a 4-year-old, which I personally have never seen. I've never heard a 4-year-old on the show.
No male is going to sing this song in public.
Sonny, go ahead.
I'm not going to do it, Hugh.
Come on, Sonny.
I'm going to have to listen to this in my car taking my kids to daycare today. This is torture. I'm not even getting my airline miles. This is ridiculous. I am outraged at what I'm being subjected to here.
Well, then let's turn to Mr. Rogers. I can't believe a handkerchief is keeping you from going to see Mr. Rogers.
Hugh, I've got a reputation to uphold.
What is the matter with you, Sonny?
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood.
I got to keep my eyes dry.
You could sing this, You
could sing this.
It's a neighborly day in this beauty.
I actually don't know the lyrics to this one.
What? Another admission against interest.
I could actually sing "Let It Go" if I had to. But
when did you join Al Qaeda?
Yeah, when did you join the Taliban?
There was a dark period in my life. I didn't want to talk.
Sonny,
about
I gotta ask.
2000s.
So you tell us to go to the movie that's basically a TV show with better special effects. You don't go see Mr. Rogers, and you won't sing Frozen.
Yeah, that's right.
We're deducting 100,000 miles from your account.
Well, That's fair. I guess that's
Where can we find your startup? What's the startup URL?
We are. We are about to unleash it on the world, but we're still probably a couple weeks away. It's still in testing. We're in beta right now. I can't reveal anything just yet, Hugh. I can't reveal anything just yet. But
you can't sing Frozen. You can't see Mr. Rogers, and you can't tell us anything.
Just follow me at Twitter. Just follow me at Sonny Bunch, SonnyBunch, and I will keep all of you looped in.
All right. Well, Sonny Bunch, this is the least satisfactory Sonny Bunch. So we gave you more time because your queue went down dramatically today. But nevertheless, thank you. You can indeed follow Sonny Bunch at SonnyBunch.com. At Sonny Bunch on Twitter. Joined now by Tarzana Joe, poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. It's been a rough few days. I've been home with a cold, and that means I get to watch all the hearings. And,
you poor man.
Oh, it's difficult. So it was time for introspection. It was time to do some thinking, and I've given it a lot. Where to place the blame and burden for the government we've got. One that has no time to govern when it isn't on vacation, is too busy holding hearings to consider legislation. One that soon a generation will in their futures be entrusting, while the present state of cities is quite arguably disgusting. Could it be the politicians are the ones to take the rap when they promise us a banquet and too often serve us pap? Or perhaps it's the reporters who prefer to preen and scold, who instead of good reporting read exactly what they're told. No, the source of all our sorrows, who I now toss 'neath the bus, the single guilty party, undeniably, is us. We've accepted second-raters who routinely drop the ball, meekly giving up and grumbling, well, you can't fight City Hall. We were told that those who govern were the brightest and the best. But since they're the ones who told us, why should we believe the rest? You can disagree completely. From my thesis, stand aloof. But as evidence, I offer that last debate as proof. Finally, after all my thinking, the answer couldn't be clearer. Next time I point the finger, I'll be looking in the mirror. That's Us by Tarzana Joe.
Well said, Joe. That will be posted at TarzanaJoe.com, I assume?
Yes, it's all my fault at TarzanaJoe.com.
I've been thinking you ought to offer a gift certificate for a Tarzana Joe poem that people can give to the people who have everything.
Oh, that's a very good idea. I'll put that up on the website. Someone offered suggested a subscription service, because I've had some people who I've written 3 poems for in a year for 3 family weddings, and they said, Tarzana Joe Prime. You pay me in advance.
I am for the Tarzana Joe gift certificate because it is a gift for people who have everything because they haven't got a Tarzana Joe poem or at least a new one.
Thank you.
Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com. Go get it. Go to TarzanaJoe.com or Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com.
Thank you.
Now, I want to make sure everybody is ready. We're going to play Frozen going out because Captain Mark Vandroff, retired United States Navy Captain Vandroff, loves Let It Go. He's asked us to play it in almost its entirety, so I'm doing my ReliefFactor.com pitch early. There it is. I took it out of my wallet last night. Seb Gorka took it out of his wallet last night. We both have. I had to sit down after they were working me like a mule yesterday. I did a 4 o'clock great event for Sullivan's, great brewery with Kilkenny beer. Then I did a 5 o'clock dinner. Then I did a 7 o'clock event. And honestly, the back was just not in great shape. But I had my Relief Factor, took it out of my wallet. I don't have lukewarm coffee, I got water. And there it is. Pete and Seth Talbot put this together. It's an amazing combination of resveratrol, icarian, curcumin, and omega, the natural supplements that help support the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains. If you stand up for 4.5 hours and shake 1,000 hands, you're not going to feel great at the end of it. But it does renew and refresh, and it does help you get wherever you are going. By the way, Pete and Seth have got a great thing planned for January when it comes to the coffee department. I will tell you about it when it is official. I think you're going to love it. I'll tell you more about it. But I'll tell you right now, go get your ReliefFactor.com, $19.95. It will get you through the day. Now, for the benefit of Mark Vandroff, let's bring up Let It Go. Mark has already got tickets. I think he's going at midnight. Maybe he went at midnight last night. All right, so this is for you, Captain Mark. Let it go, Mark. Let it go. Jerry Hendricks might be this as well. Here we go. Let it go, Mark. Let it go. We'll be right back, America. From Cleveland, AM 1420, The Answer. It's Hugh Hewitt.
The cold never bothered me anyway.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Nigel Farage in Great Britain is announcing in his manifesto, news flash, nobody cares, Nigel. You missed your chance to actually go down in British history as a key player in this most important, momentous election since Margaret Thatcher. You're dissipating anyway. The Brexit Party's down to 3%. No one's going to vote for it who isn't drunk. And everyone's going to vote for Boris, who's running away with this. And that's great for America. That's great for the world. But it's most important for the United Kingdom. Let's come back to yesterday's hearing. I want to play Adam Schiff, who is just, I think his negative rating must be like near 100%. Democrats think he's goofy. Republicans think he's just completely deranged. Here's what he says yesterday. Despite the article I read from your Politico, despite it, if there was no Ukraine meddling, they'd let Chalupa testify. He has blocked her from doing so. Adam Schiff yesterday, cut number 2.
And the de facto leader of the Three Amigos, who had regular access to President Donald Trump, and pressed the new Ukrainian President, Vladimir Zelensky, for 2 investigations Trump believed would help his re-election campaign. The first investigation was of a discredited conspiracy theory that Ukraine and not Russia was responsible for interfering in our 2016 election.
All right, stop. I told the audience last night in Cleveland, if you have to distort your opponent's argument, you've lost. Nobody believes that Russia did not attack our election on that dais. I believe it. You should believe it. It is absolutely indisputable. The Republican report during the election proved it. Everyone knows it. I also believe Ukraine meddled, based upon the Ken Vogel piece and additional reporting I have seen. And Adam Schiff says, oh, it's one or the other. That is a distortion that is intended absolutely to confuse, mislead, distort, and in any way, shape, or form deny you the truth. He is not trustworthy. He lies all the time. Devin Nunes countered the Fiona Hill testimony yesterday, cut number 3.
I'd also like to take a quick moment on an assertion Ms. Hill made in the statement that she submitted to this committee, in which she claimed that some committee members deny that Russia meddled in the 2016 election. As I noted in my opening statement on Wednesday, that in March 2018, Intelligence Committee Republicans published the results of a year-long investigation into Russian meddling. The 240-page report analyzed 2016 Russian meddling campaign, the U.S. government reaction to it, Russian campaigns in other countries, and provided specific recommendations to improve American election security. I'm going to ask my staff to hand these reports to our 2 witnesses today, just so they can have a recollection of their memory. As America may or may not know, Democrats refused to sign on to the Republican report. Instead, they decided to adopt minority views filled with collusion conspiracy theories. Needless to say, it is entirely possible for 2 separate nations to engage in election meddling at the same time, and Republicans believe we should take meddling seriously by all foreign countries, regardless of which campaign is the target. I'd like to submit for the record a copy of our report titled Report on Russian Active Measures.
Yeah, you know, it's just as silly what Fiona Hill said, what Adam Schiff said. It's just silly. And it's why these hearings are losing steam. They just don't deal with the truth. Let's go to David Holmes, the Foreign Service officer who's sitting next to Gordon when Gordon gets a call from the president talking about how he heard everything. Cut number 4.
Ambassador Sondland placed a call on his mobile phone, and I heard him announce himself several times along the lines of Gordon Sondland holding for the president. It appeared that he was being transferred through several layers of switchboards and assistants, and I then noticed Ambassador Sondland's demeanor changed and understood that he had been connected to President Trump. While Ambassador Sondland's phone was not on speakerphone, I could hear the president's voice through the earpiece of the phone. The president's voice was loud and recognizable, and Ambassador Sondland held the phone away from his ear for a period of time, presumably because of the loud volume. I heard Ambassador Sondland greet the president and explain he was calling from Kyiv. I heard President Trump then clarify that Ambassador Sondland was in Ukraine. Ambassador Sondland replied yes, he was in Ukraine, and went on to state that President Zelensky, quote, loves your ass. I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it.
All right, that's it. Now, if you saw Chris Cuomo trying to pull this off with Dana Bash yesterday, you were treated to one of the more amusing things ever. I like Chris a lot, but Dana Bash did not. God bless Dana Bash. She's the best in the business, and she refused to say, oh, I hear your mom, because you couldn't hear it. Doesn't mean that the fella didn't hear Sondland's call. Doesn't mean David Holmes didn't hear it. What it means is what he says he heard is hearsay. It's like literally hearsay. And he heard something that he thought was this or that. And the president's just saying he wants an investigation. I want an investigation. I want chalupa. I want to know what the Ukrainians did. I want to know, don't you? The Democrats don't. Stay tuned, America. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show straight ahead.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the movie in theaters today.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 8 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio on the road. I am in Cleveland this morning, back in the land. A depressed city because the NFL commissioner hates Cleveland. He suspended Myles Garrett, didn't change his mind, rushed to a conclusion, wouldn't hear any evidence. Stubborn, obstinate, always closed to the best interest of the players, the community, and the game. Roger Goodell just likes power and likes to throw it around. He likes to humble people, and he feels bigger when he does that. Even though Mason Rudolph started the doggone thing, he admitted that he did. We heard about the racial slur yesterday, but he's not Tom Brady, not a quarterback. Pretty soon we're going to hear a lot more about this because Roger Goodell has once again put the league in a terrible position, but that's just the way it is. In Cleveland, we're used to Roger Goodell heading us. We just get over it. Had a great time at the WHK AM 1420 The Answer events yesterday. You know, most fun. I'm at the Barbecue Brew and Hughes put on by Sullivan's. It's the pre-game. And up walks, I'm kind of stunned. Avery Friedman is there with Larry Morrow. Now, Avery is one of the country's leading civil rights attorneys. If I ever needed a civil rights case litigated, I'd hire Avery. He's a man of the left. I've debated him. We've had a great time. Larry Morrow is a Radio Hall of Fame professional, 4 decades on Cleveland radio, just spinning the hits. And I sometimes call him Lance Morrow because of the great Time magazine essayist, but it's Larry Morrow. And anyone who grew up in Cleveland, listen to Larry. And they both show up at the event. Now, I thought Avery was coming to debate me, but we just like each other. It's kind of old school. He's wrong about everything, but I really love Avery, and I respect his ability. You see him on CNN most, so that was fun. We had a great time. But the best time last night was when I got a chance in the event with hundreds of people to say to him, look, Chick-fil-A has inexplicably cut off the Salvation Army. That means cutting off homeless people, addicts, drug addicts, alcoholics. It means cutting off abused women. It means cutting off children without any Christmas present. I can't believe Chick-fil-A did it. But it just means the obligation on this audience is higher and longer and harder to do. We raised $18,000 in the first day. I need to do that every day for 50 days. We really have to help save the lost and the least. And I'm asking you to do that today at HughHewitt.com. I mean, 18 grand in one day, that is great. Who does it help? No, don't believe the radicals are attacking Chick-fil-A or the Chick-fil-A who bent the knee to the radicals. Believe Marco. Marco lost a good job at Coca-Cola in Chicago. He ended up moving his family to the Dallas, Texas area.
My situation in the beginning was a little bit hard because I don't have a job. I don't have a relation with anybody. But I found the Salvation Army. I need a little bit of focus to find a job. I help families to get services. And usually a lot of families there, a lot of homeless people enjoy the food. The meals, they're very nutritious, and the staff, they're always very nice with you when you go and sit there and they're asking for you. They know, some of the people from the staff, they know even your name, and it's always grateful to be a place like Salvation Army.
From job counseling like Marco received, to food banks, adult rehabilitation services, after-school programs, where underprivileged kids always get a friendly smile, a prayer, and a hug. The Salvation Army is ready to help, which is why you and I need to help the Salvation Army. Just click on the red kettle banner at HughHewitt.com to help the Salvation Army doing the most good. Please do it. We did it yesterday, fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I. Lots of people were at the event last night, went home and donated. Thank you to all of you. But if you're listening and you're thinking about it, please go and be generous. Now, I got to go back to yesterday's hearing, because yesterday's hearing was extraordinary. We had I'll play it again. David Holmes talking about Gordon Sondland's phone call with the president, cut number 4.
Ambassador Sondland placed a call on his mobile phone, and I heard him announce himself several times along the lines of Gordon Sondland holding for the president. It appeared that he was being transferred through several layers of switchboards and assistants, and I then noticed Ambassador Sondland's demeanor changed and understood that he had been connected to President Trump. While Ambassador Sondland's phone was not on speakerphone, I could hear the president's voice through the earpiece of the phone. The president's voice was loud and recognizable, and Ambassador Sondland held the phone away from his ear for a period of time, presumably because of the loud volume. I heard Ambassador Sondland greet the president and explain he was calling from Kyiv. I heard President Trump then clarify that Ambassador Sondland was in Ukraine. Ambassador Sondland replied, yes, he was in Ukraine, and went on to state that President Zelensky, quote, loves your ass. I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it.
All right, there you have it. John Ratcliffe, member of Congress from Texas, former United States attorney, asks the follow-up questions, cut 15.
Your testimony where you said you heard President Trump say Is he going to do the investigation? And Ambassador Sondland said he's going to do it. He'll do anything you ask him to. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What did President Trump say next?
He said, good, what about Sweden?
He said what?
Sir, sorry, I need to look at back where we are in the middle of the conversation here. Where are we from the testimony? Exactly. So then they turned to the Sweden conversation.
What did President Trump say next?
He said, good, what about Sweden?
Good, what about Sweden? Good, what about Sweden? Why isn't that in your statement?
Sir, it's not a word for word, every single word in the conversation.
But it's the most important part of the conversation.
Well, then they turned to Sweden. They turned to the other topic.
Respectfully, Mr. Holmes, this impeachment inquiry is based on the call the day before where President Trump, as part of a bribery scheme, as part of an extortion scheme, as part of a quid pro quo, according to the Democrats, demanded investigations in exchange for either military aid or a White House meeting. And the next day, you were witness to President Trump receiving word that the bribery scheme was successful. The extortion scheme was successful. And his response, was, good. What about Sweden?
Yes, sir. The Ukraine portion of that conversation was extremely brief.
What was the first thing the president said on the call? This was clear. You had a clear recollection of this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Radcliffe, please allow Mr. Holmes to answer.
Yes, sir. Sondland greeted the president.
How?
He said, hello, Mr. President, I'm in Ukraine. I'm in Kyiv. And the president said, are you in Ukraine?
You think he said, I think you're in Ukraine? He said what?
He said, are you in Kyiv, Ukraine?
What did you hear President Trump say about ASAP Rocky?
I did not hear President Trump's side of the conversation about ASAP Rocky.
You said, how did we go from the conversation was very loud and his voice was recognizable to, as you say here, when the conversation shifted, I could only hear Ambassador Sondland's side of the conversation.
Yes, sir. As I've testified, the initial part of the call, Ambassador Sondland, sort of when the president came on the call, he sort of winced and held the phone away from his ear for the initial portion of the call. And then at some point in the call, he stopped doing that. And I don't know why. I don't know if he turned the volume down. I don't know if the president spoke more quietly. I don't know if he got used to the volume. I don't know what changed.
What did change? It's important. This was memorable.
I don't know, sir. It was Ambassador Sondland stopped moving the phone away from his ear. That's what
it was?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just so awful for Mr. Holmes. Elise Stefanik, member of the Avengers, cut number 17.
Before I turn to our witnesses, I just wanted to say to my Democratic colleagues, not a single Republican member of this committee has said that Russia did not meddle in the 2016 elections. As the ranking member stated, we published a report focused on Russian active measures in 2016 with policy recommendations as to how we strengthen our cyber resiliency and election security to counter Russia. I myself have worked with members of this very committee on this issue, but also on the House Armed Services Committee. So to have our Democratic colleagues say these untruthful statements just reeks of political desperation in their continued obsession to manipulate mainstream media coverage. But the good news is the American people understand that this has been a partisan process from the start. The Democratic coordination with the whistleblower, the incessant and astounding leaks, the unprecedented closed-door process, closed to the majority of members, closed to the press, closed to the people, starting this inquiry without taking a vote. And then when finally forced to take a vote, the vote was with bipartisan opposition.
Okay, Avengers assembled. John Ratcliffe, Elise Stefanik, Mike Turner, Jim Jordan, all of you. Devin Nunes, Avengers assembled. The American people are not buying this. This is the biggest piece of garbage. It is so silly. Such a time waste, a time suck. And that's why it's now underwater in Wisconsin. President Trump is now ahead of every Democrat in Wisconsin, and it ain't going to get any better. With David Holmes saying, I could hear it over the telephone. I heard it. No, you're not persuasive. I'll be right back, America. Ukraine meddled in the election. Don't forget that.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt in Cleveland. I did have the time of my life last night. I always love being in the land with AM 1420, The Answer, WHKRadio.com. Always great to be in Cleveland. Great time last night. And, of course, I had the time of my life listening to bits and pieces of the chaos that is the Democratic impeachment hearings dissolving into incoherent finger-pointing and an absolute inability to persuade anyone other than the fact that the Democrats are going to impeach the president on
extortion or bribery with these witnesses, as we know, direct testimony of the phone call with the President of the United States. Beyond that, they only had contact with Sondland, and again, Sondland indicated he had contact with no one on the planet. Volker testified that he did have direct contact both with the Ukrainians and with the President of the United States, and indicated that the President of the United States did not condition either a phone call, a meeting, or aid upon Ukraine undertaking investigations, and also testified that the Ukrainians did not believe that either. We also have the direct statements from the President of Ukraine and the Foreign Minister that they did not feel any pressure to undertake investigations. And we also have the evidence that we're all very much aware of, which is they did not undertake any investigations.
So what are they doing? Ohio's Jim Jordan sums it up in cut 21 at the post-hearing presser.
Democrats have never got over the fact that this new guy who's never been in this town, never been in politics, this new guy came in here and has shaken this place up, and that drives them crazy. They've never accepted the will of 63 million Americans. They've never accepted the fact that Donald Trump won an electoral college landslide, and they are trying to do everything they can. And it was first FBI investigation, then it was the Mueller investigation, now it's this. They're trying to do everything they can to, as Mr. Green, Democrat Representative Al Green said, impeach him because they know he's going to win re-election. And so that's the unfortunate position they put our country in. I thought Dr. Hill's statement where she said, we got to quit this kind of stuff that is tearing our country apart, that is so true. That what is happening is not good for our culture, not good for our nation, and yet the Democrats do not care. They are bound and determined to do whatever it takes to get after this president. And again, I think the American people see through it. They see that the facts are on the president's side, and they know this process has been entirely unfair. And frankly, I don't know where it goes next. I don't know what they got planned. We'll just have to wait and see, and we'll take some questions.
Yeah, it is going nowhere except down in the esteem of the American people. Now, I normally wouldn't spend a lot of time on this, but the New York Times dragged me for interviewing Tom Cotton on this show, where Tom Cotton pointed out an Arkansas constituent of his was trying to get a paternity test from Hunter Biden, the former vice president's son. She finally did succeed. The former vice president has a new grandson. By the way, I'm glad that she kept the baby. I am. So Hunter Biden has a son. He better pay child support. Joe will see that he does. But Peter Doocy, it's obviously newsworthy. Peter Doocy brings it up. Cut number 13, Joe Biden on Fox News yesterday.
This meeting with the mayors. I'm wondering if you have a comment on this report and court filing out of Arkansas that your son Hunter just made you grandfather again.
No, that's a private matter. I have no comment. But only you would ask that. You're a good man. You're a good man.
Thank you guys. This is all
Classy.
the time we have.
Only you would ask that. You're a good man. You're a good man, classy. The vice president is upset. It's a private matter. No, it's not a private matter. It goes to Hunter Biden's character. It goes. He wouldn't support the child. He wouldn't appear for the paternity test until it became evident. I mean, Hunter Biden's got problems. That's why they want to keep him away from the committee. It all goes to his character. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Salvation Army.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt in the MobileReliefFactor.com studio in Cleveland. At dinner last night, one of my guests said, I love this Matthew Elliott guy. I didn't know how much I cared about United Kingdom politics until the last couple of weeks. Matthew Elliott is senior editor-at-large for Brexit Central, one of the masterminds of the Leave campaign, now consulting widely on various issues across the United Kingdom. As the Conservatives increase their lead, here are the most recent polls. Yesterday, Boris Johnson has an 11% lead in the Daily Telegraph, a 12% lead in the Times, a 16% lead in the Evening Standard, a 10% lead in ICM Research, a 18% lead in Cantor, a 14% lead in Survation, and a 15% lead in the Mail on Sunday. Matthew Elliott, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Thank you for the announcement music. I love it.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit worried about these numbers. I'm afraid of complacency.
I think you're right to warn against that. And certainly in the last general election, the Conservatives were very complacent. But actually speaking to my Conservative contacts, that complacency isn't there at the moment. And they recognise if you run these figures through the sort of standard electoral calculus mechanisms, they come out with like a majority of between 70 and 80. But when I speak to my contacts, they point me to several things. First of all, the Scottish National Party dominating massively in Scotland. And, of course, the Conservatives need to retain their 13 seats there to keep their figures up. And there's talk that all the other parties may lose their seats there. So that's one area. The second area is those Lib Dem seats, Liberal Democrat seats. That's our third party, the ones which Nick Clegg lost to David Cameron in 2015. There are certain signs in some of those seats. The Lib Dems are doing quite well. So again, those could be Conservative seats that switch back into the Lib Dem column. And then just more generally, there's talk that the Conservative vote may be concentrated in their existing seats, so not really helping them in those crucial Labour marginals they need to win over in the Midlands and North of England. So when you add up those three things together, a lot of my sort of contacts say to me, well, we're looking at more like a majority of sort of 15 to 20. And then, of course, they rightly warn that there could be a tightening of the polls in the final couple of weeks of the campaign. We just had Labour announce their manifesto with, as you might expect, lots of giveaways to people, including a 5% pay rise to all public sector workers. Now, perhaps that will sway some people. Perhaps they'll be duped by those pledges. So who knows what will happen? We can't be complacent. There's no room for complacency.
Now, Matthew Elliott, tell me about the first debate and how you think it went and if any impact it had on the polling and on the motivation of the various party bases.
Well, we have much less experience of running election debates than I know you guys have in the US. I must say it was a bit of a scrappy affair where I felt the host was intervening too much on the candidates and not allowing them to develop their points or indeed challenge each other sufficiently. So that was quite disappointing. The polling afterwards suggested it was really pretty much a dead heat with Boris being slightly ahead. But because it was a dead heat, and of course because Corbyn's so much more disliked than Boris is, that suggests that Corbyn actually came across pretty well and probably exceeded expectations. We've got more debates to come. We've got one on Friday where all the party leaders will be appearing again. So Jeremy Corbyn, Boris Johnson, but also the Lib Dems and SNP as well. And there are various other debates and environmental debates next week. What's really interesting is the question of are people tuning in this election? And there's always talk that people don't really focus properly until the final week. Well, in this campaign, there's going to be a historically high number of people who take part in that, I think. All the polling at the moment suggests that we're going to have high turnout. People recognise it's on knife edge. They recognise their vote will matter. So I think we'll see people making note of what happens in these debates.
Now, Matthew, the thing I credit Boris Johnson with doing is repeating, let's get Brexit done, about 20 times in the first debate. Because if it's an election on getting Brexit done, he wins. If people think, I got to get this is a nightmare. We have to end this. We have to get out. We have to get off the pot. We got to go. Do you think he delivered that message effectively? Because he delivered it again and again and again. And the moderator was horrible, by the way. She did interrupt every single coherent set. It's just, I've done 4 presidential debates in the primaries. I know what you should not do, which is interrupt a candidate making a point.
I think that he is making the point about getting Brexit done consistently, and that really is being driven home. So I do think he's doing very well there. He's also doing very well at pushing the Conservative message on the National Health Service. And, more or less every visit he does is to a hospital. So there are lots of images in the national media, but also the local media, crucially, of Boris visiting hospitals and sort of showing he's committed to the NHS, which is really important to the UK audience. And, somebody once said that the NHS is the closest that we have in the UK to a national religion. So you can tell how important it is.
Now,
the third point is...
Go ahead.
The third point is this. What we start to see is when Boris visits factories or does his walkabouts in the streets, we're seeing working class folk really come out in favour of him. There was someone was holding up signs saying, "We love Boris," and things like that. And in the latest polling, you're actually seeing the Conservatives do much better than Labour with the working classes. And it's actually with the middle classes that Labour come up and get most of their votes. So Boris is having a huge breakthrough, quite similar, I think, to what Trump did in 2016, where he started to appeal to some of those blue-collar workers in Michigan and elsewhere.
Now, Matthew, in the Leave campaign, which you helped run, you guys dominated social media. In the last general election, the Conservatives, for whatever reason, were just terrible at it. I have been monitoring Boris's feed, the Conservative feed, a lot of the British journalists on my Twitter feed. They're doing much better. But that's what I see. What do you see?
So the Conservatives have massively upped their game, and they're doing very well on this. But I would say that the Labour Party is doing equally well on social media, if not slightly better, when you start looking at the number of shares and likes. Now, perhaps that's something to do with, Twitter being a bit more left-wing. That's definitely a point. Perhaps it's also to do with people being less confident if they're on the centre-right at sharing Conservative material. I'm not sure why it is, but you've got to give it to the Conservative Party. They've massively upped their game. They're doing really well on this. And Boris, I come back to this point again, he's a natural campaigner. He's very charismatic. He's very lovable in his own way. So people do like sharing material he puts out. And he is capable. He's a big enough figure and a strong enough figure to be able to shoulder being at the centre of a presidential campaign in a way in which Theresa May sadly wasn't able to do.
Now, it requires sort of seamless integration of the sort that Donald Trump has mastered because he does it himself, right? He's always been on Twitter. Dan Scavino does a fine job following him around and pushing his message out to his base. It seems to me that Boris is comfortable with this now and that the social media team is better for the Conservatives. Are you helping them, Matthew? Have you seen that? Because that's what I'm seeing is that he pops up in my timeline. I don't go looking for him. He just pops up in his yellow jacket at the hospital. I mean, that's what you need to do.
So I'm not involved with any of the campaigning side of things. I'm helping out in different ways, but not on the social media side of this campaign. So Isaac Levino, who's the campaign director for the Conservatives, he had a great victory in Australia with the Liberal Party just a recent while back. He is the mastermind of all of this, and he's running a great campaign there. I know the people are working so hard in central office on all of this. And crucially, another bit of news from this week, we had the donation figures come in for all the parties for the declared donations. And the Conservatives are doing so much better than all the other parties in terms of raising money. They raised about sort of $5 million plus in the first week of the campaign. Now, I know in the US context, that's not very much money, but in the UK, to raise £5 million in a week for a campaign is an amazing achievement. And also when you consider that in the UK, unlike in the US, you have spending limits. So for the national campaign, the Conservative Party has a spending limit of about £25 million. They are way ahead. They will be able to spend all the money they're allowed to spend, whereas Labour will be slightly behind.
Now, you also have mentioned, I want to close with this, in the Brit system, you're not allowed to do, as you say, adverts. And that would be very devastating to the American political consulting class, because that's where they make their money. Where does the money go if you can't spend it on TV adverts?
Well, of course, it's now social media adverts. And one thing we did on Vote Leave was we spent roughly 80% of our budget on social media ads in the final 2 weeks of the campaign, when people were really tuned in and really deciding whether to vote to leave or remain. And I'm sure that when we see the figures for the Conservative Party after the election, I don't think it'll be as much as 80% of the budget. It's a different format of campaign, because you have parliamentary candidates. But it will be a huge chunk of the money going on social media advertising. I remember my first campaign back in 1997, when you would still have the billboard ads, and you would still have newspaper ads. So lots of the money went on that. I haven't seen any of those this time around. It's all going on social media advertising.
That is true. One quick last question. Are there any new bright young stars showing up on the Conservative hustings? Are there some new people standing for various constituencies who are just dazzling?
I would emphasize one person, and it's Rishi Sunak, who is the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He's number 2 in the Treasury Department, working for Sajid Javid. He has been pushed so hard during this campaign, quite rightly, because he's charismatic, he's a good communicator, and he will be standing in for Boris in a debate at the end of next week, I believe. So he is seen as a rising star. The party's pushing him hard, and he's a really attractive politician to look out for.
Tell us his Twitter handle if you happen to know it, Matthew.
I'm sorry I don't, but it's Rishi Sunak.
Rishi, R-I-C-H-E? I'm just trying to spell it, Matthew.
This seems like a spelling bee competition. R-I-S. I'm not going to go there. It's Rishi
All right,
Sunak.
don't go there. We'll find it. We'll find it, Matthew Elliott. I can spell Matthew. Matthew Elliott is found on Twitter at Matthew_Elliott, 2 L's, 2 T's. Thank you, Matthew. Time for me to remind everyone, if you're getting in your car, take your Relief Factor with you. ReliefFactor.com, $19.95. Get you a 3-week starter pack. Keep it coming to your house. Keep using it every day. It kicks in. It gets your levels up to where you need it by carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and, of course, Omega. You've got to be taking it for good heart health and everything else, but mostly because of the temporary support for the minor aches and pains, relief that you need in your life. And if you're living like I do, or you're living even half of my speed, people kept coming up to me like, how do you do this? I said, look, I take my ReliefFactor.com, and I get to the airport early. I try not to stress out, and I haven't even lost my wallet this trip. ReliefFactor.com keeps you on the move, keeps you feeling good, looking forward to the weekend. Don't forget to get your ReliefFactor.com. And please don't forget, Pete and Seth Talbot would love me if I said that Salvation Army Red Kettle is up. It's open. We opened it a week early because Chick-fil-A threw out Salvation Army. So if you're listening to me right now, go over to HughHewitt.com and make a contribution, even if it's $5. If it can be $5,000, great. If it can be $50,000, better. If you're someone who's been blessed in their life and you can make a big donation, a 6-figure donation, please do. Whatever it is, it matters so much now that Chick-fil-A has booted out Salvation Army. The lost and the least need your help. They really do need your help. Everybody, every segment of society, every color, every gender, every orientation, Salvation Army takes care of them. The Red Kettle is open and swinging at HughHewitt.com. Coming right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the movie in theaters.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Cleveland, and I love being in Cleveland. I wish I was in San Diego today. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt is attending the commissioning of her nephew as a Navy SEAL officer, getting his trident today, continuing a tradition in her family, dating to 1867, active duty naval officer since 1867, and fetching Mrs. Hewitt's family. 3 of them on duty today as of the trident commissioning today. Salute to my nephew. Well done. Now, Jonathan Swan of Axios.com joins me. Good morning, Jonathan.
Morning, Hugh. How are you?
I am terrific. I think are the impeachment hearings done? Is this long national nightmare over?
Unless John Bolton wakes up tomorrow morning and says, I've had a change of heart and I want to voluntarily testify, I believe the impeachment hearings are done, yes.
And so what do we expect to happen next?
Well, we have to find out. We're trying to find this out now, to what extent the Judiciary Committee drafts broader articles of impeachment, or whether they stick to strictly Ukrainian-related matters. There is some difference of opinion within the Democratic House. Some members have always wanted a broader impeachment. They want to have a laundry list of articles. Others believe it should be more surgical. And so we'll see that play out. My expectation is they will keep it pretty narrow to, the subjects of what's been covered in these hearings. And my view, based on reporting, is that the fundamental political dynamics in the Senate have not changed at all this week, despite everything that happened this week. And what I mean by that is I have seen no evidence that the testimony this week has had a meaningful difference in the views of the critical Republican senators in the Senate. I don't think that firstly, I've never thought that there's much of a chance of any more than 3 or 4 Republicans turning on the president to convict him. I've thought all along, based on conversations I've had, that it's possible that 0 end up voting Republicans to convict him. I don't know what the number is. Many of the key senators have been very, very tight-lipped in the last week or two, but I don't believe, based on our reporting, that there's been a meaningful shift resulting from this week.
Jonathan, I agree. I don't think any Republicans will vote for this. If anyone does, it'll be Lisa Murkowski. I do not believe Mitt Romney will do this. I believe it is an appalling breach of due process, that there isn't even an offense, much less an impeachable offense. And I've watched it pretty closely. Now, I warned my audience in Cleveland last night, if something new comes up, if they find a transcript of Rudy calling the president and saying, hey, we're going to go after Joe Biden in 2020 and the Ukraine's going to help us, that could change. But there's nothing there. And I think Adam Schiff, I want to play for you a little bit of Adam Schiff last night as he wrapped things up. Get your reaction. Cut number 14, getting touchy in his closing remarks.
Intelligence agencies. I wish I had heard just some of the righteous indignation we heard in the committee today when the president questioned that fundamental conclusion of our intelligence agencies. But of course, they were silent when the president said that. They'll show indignation today, but they will cower when they hear the president questioning the very conclusions that our intelligence community has reached. But we saw something interesting also today. My colleagues sought to use you, Dr. Hill, to besmirch the character of Colonel Vindman.
Now, the testiness is not a good sign that it went well, I think, Jonathan Swan. I think Adam Schiff realizes his numbers, as in the Marquette Law School poll, are down. The Democrats' numbers are down. His members are not enthusiastic. It's been a fiasco from the start, a collision of competing narratives. I mean, if they could get a do-over, would they do it again?
Yeah, I believe they would do it again. I don't know that Pelosi would do it again, but...
That's what I mean. I don't think she would.
Right. No, sorry. Pelosi is very distinct from Adam Schiff and many of the others. She has always, all along, had grave reservations about impeachment. She's made that clear publicly. She's been worried about what might happen if they went down this path. And again, I don't know. I don't like speculating because I haven't talked to Speaker Pelosi about this in the last week, and I don't know what she's thinking right now, so I don't want to put my own views into her head. But what she was worried about appears, and we have to put an asterisk next to appears because these are early polls and we need to see whether it's a pattern, but certainly it has not been encouraging from a Democratic point of view.
No, I would love to go out with if I knew now what I knew then, because I think your speculation, I understand your caution, I think your speculation, I don't think she'd do it again, is very well justified because she always knew the danger and the danger is coming true. Last 30 seconds to you, Jonathan.
Oh, the last 30 seconds to me? Well,
yep.
Listen, I am curious as to whether anything else comes out. I think that's the only meaningful question right now.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 8 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Okay, they're going to type this in. They've got the, thank you, Josh. Yep.
You want any clips in the first segment?
No, I would talk impeachment in the first segment.
Okay.
Actually, we might play some clips from the end
keep
of
that
the,
one open.
The Hugh Hewitt Show
from the
on the Salem Radio Network
yesterday's hearing.
returns from break in 45 seconds.
And then another thing with Hugh Hewitt, you need to re-mute that guy to be recalled. Okay.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome. Good morning, America. Morning glory to everyone. Bonjour, hi in Canada. Greetings to everyone in Israel who's listening. And, of course, to our friends in the PRC who have begun to talk all the time with us. It's time for the Hillsdale Dialogue. Good morning. How are you, my friend Matthew Spalding, Dean of the Hillsdale Graduate School of Public Policy?
Good to see you, be with you this morning. This is a great week, or at least the end, hopefully, to part of the process, and we move on.
Now, the president has just called into Fox and Friends, and so I would like to see if we can bring that up to get your commentary on it in real time. Matthew Spalding, Dean of the Hillsdale School of Public Policy. While we look for that, I'll remind everyone, Hillsdale EDU is where you find all things Hillsdale. Do we have the president?
People. Mr. President, you say it could be historic. You have suggested in the past that this might go much higher than the Department of Justice or the FBI during the Obama administration. Are you suggesting it could actually go up into the West Wing of the Obama
when
years?
You're dealing at the highest levels of government. They were spying on my campaign. This is my opinion. I said it a long time ago. Remember when I put out a tweet and I talked about the wiretapping in quotes, meaning modern-day version of whatever wiretapping may be, and all hell broke loose.
Well, how high did it go, Mr. President? How high did it go? Your opinion.
Personally, I think it goes all the way, okay, because I think it's impossible.
To Barack Obama.
For Brennan and for Clapper and for all of these losers that you had over there, I think it's impossible for them to be doing things. And let's see what it all says. But It's impossible. Susan Rice, the person that worked at the United Nations, who went after FISA reports and went after reports like she ate them for lunch. And, you know, you look at the previous administration, they went after like a few, and she was getting them at levels that nobody's ever even imagined before, and it had nothing to do with her. No, I think this goes to the highest level. I hate to say it. I think it's a disgrace. They thought I was going to win, and they said, how could we stop them? They wrote up the phony fake dossier, the disgusting fake dossier, and they tried to have it put out prior to the election. And just to show you how incompetent they were, they spent millions and millions of dollars. Hillary Clinton paid for it, and the Democrats. A lot of it had to do, they say, with Ukraine.
But Mr. President,
it's very interesting. It's very interesting. They have the server, right, from the DNC, Democratic National Committee.
Who has the server?
Now, the FBI went in and they told them, "Get out of here! We're not giving it to you." They gave the server to CrowdStrike or whatever it's called, which is a company owned by a very wealthy Ukrainian. And I still want to see that server. You know, the FBI has never gotten that server. That's a big part of this.
All right, let me go back to Matthew Spalding. The president, clearly animated, thinks he did well, Matthew Spalding, and he believes that the new Inspector General report on FISA is going to blow the roof off of a lot of scandal, and he's still interested in CrowdStrike. What say you?
I think step back from it. I think what we're seeing here, keep both these things in mind. This impeachment proceeding that's going down one route, being pushed by the Democratic Party in the House, and the movement that's going on by this president digging into these past activities writ large. This is a debate about the role and the activities of this bureaucratic state and what people were up to as that bureaucratic state has become politicized. The president is looking back to what went on in 2016. The Democrats are trying to preserve that and use that and protect that bureaucracy to go after this president who wants to have. So there's this larger debate about the status of the bureaucracy, which I think he's dead on about. The other thing, I think that IG report is going to be explosive. I think this is one of the reasons why the criticisms of Attorney General Barr are so intense to try to undermine him. I think that will lay out a lot of things that have heretofore been not seen, not understood by the public, and I think that will set up between these two broad activities, this movement of impeachment and how it's been carried out and how it's been it's playing out, and what's going on with the president pushing back, this IG report coming out, the questions about the server, all these things, I think this will be the larger narrative going into the next presidential election. And I think it's a larger debate about the nature of bureaucratic government and whether we are acting under a system of consent, because a lot of this is being uncovered that it turns out that much of government, much activity is occurring actually without the consent of the American people. And I think President Trump is animated because he's been pulling that back, and he's getting more and more traction in that debate. And if this public report from the IG, if this lays us out with that level of detail that I would expect from the Attorney General and the IG, it's going to be devastating to that argument.
Now, Dean Spalding, interesting that you would bring this up. Last night, Salem has been running a tour called The War for America's Soul, named after Seb Gorka's new book. And Seb and I are colleagues, and I know him a little bit, and we agree about 70% of the time, 30% of the time we disagree, and we had a vigorous disagreement last night, which goes to the lie out there that we are all being told what to say every day. In fact, I argue almost every day with my the senior vice president for programming at Salem, Phil Boyce, about what counts as breaking news. I mean, we just always argue in the company. There is no party line. But last night, I said, I don't like deep state. I don't believe there's a deep state. Deep state's knocks on the door in the night, people taken away, thumbnails pulled off, digits removed. That's a deep state. I think we have a permanent government. Seb disagrees vehemently, believes that there is a deep state. You, without prompting, just use the term permanent government. But both of us go to the central question as outlined by our friend, Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale. The central question of our time. Will the people rule the government, or will the government rule the people? And that is on display in this impeachment fiasco, and it's on. You hear the president speaking to it this morning. Is that correctly stated?
No, I think it is. I have the same reservations as you do about the idea of a deep state. There's something to certain aspects of it having become very politicized within intelligence, using secret. I understand all that. But the term deep state implies a certain conspiratorial theory of all this, which I don't like that, partially because I think it masks what's really going on, which is I think is something much more significant and actually goes back historically a lot farther. I mean, you go back and look at, as one example, Reagan's famous Time for Choosing speech in 1964. He warns of a bureaucracy that is undermining the consent of the American people. Go back behind that. I mean, the progressive argument about the rise of bureaucratic administrative experts, there's the root of all this. So there's a larger permanent bureaucracy that has come into being. Congress has delegated its powers to create this thing. Now we're in the midst of a huge battle over the control of it, which has been going on over the whole course of the 20th century. And aspects of that, indeed, are becoming politicized because they are not neutral in the way the progressives hoped they would be. So there is this huge, very significant battle going on about the nature of American government. It has something to do with the new form of government that's been created over the 20th century. I think the president is engaged in that battle. He sees it, not necessarily the most articulate way, but he goes to the heart of it. He goes to the jugular on it. I think that's the essence of what Attorney General Barr is talking about in his speech recently at the Federal Society.
We're going to talk about that after the break.
Battle. I think that is the battle upon us, and I also think that's what's behind a lot of the impeachment push. This president threatens that modern state, can't have that, and look at who's testifying against him are aspects of the modern bureaucratic state which think that he is the one that is illegitimate, and that is not the way to rule, whereas he actually, for all of his imperfections and flaws, is actually trying to restore what I would argue is a traditional understanding of the American presidency vis-a-vis Congress.
Yeah, Seb Gorka got very animated last night and asked me when I left the government, which was, I'd been confirmed in the Senate in 87 and I left in 89. He said, things have changed. It's gotten much worse. And he brought up the intergovernmental consensus. He said, no one votes for the intergovernmental consensus. That's the deep state. I just disagree, but I nevertheless think we're all in agreement on one thing, which is that the president's got to get back control of the executive branch and that there were at least 50 bad people operating as a rogue element in the federal government, and we're going to find that out in the IG report. When we come back after break, Dean Matt Spalding. You know, I had Amity Schlaze on yesterday, Matt, and, probably the most important center-right historian in America. She laid down her new book, Great Society, yesterday. This all gets, it goes on steroids in the 60s, and it all connects up to today. And we'll talk about that after the break. We've got to get back to the unitary executive. Matthew Spalding and I talk about it during the break. Go to hillsdale.edu, where all of our previous Hillsdale dialogues are at hugh4hillsdale.com.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Salvation Army.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in
Not
1
only
minute
from there, but from
and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
This residual power to meet contingency is essentially the federative power discussed by Locke in his second treatise. And finally, there are the executive powers necessary for internal management of the executive. These are the powers necessary for the president to superintend and control the executive functions, including the powers necessary to protect the independence of the executive branch and the confidentiality of its internal deliberations. Some of these powers are expressed in the Constitution, such as the power of appointment, and others are implicit in the Constitution. For example, the removal power. One of the more amusing aspects of modern progressive polemic is their breathless attacks on the unitary executive theory. They portray this as some newfangled theory to justify executive power of sweeping and unfettered scope. I think some of you may have seen that horrible movie Vice about Vice President Dick Cheney, and there's this scene where the young Dick Cheney, he was young, I think he may have been 36, and he was chief of staff at the White House. He goes in to meet the young Nino Scalia over at the Office of Legal Counsel, and they talk about this new nefarious theory that will allow them to just take over the world, and it's called the unitary executive theory. And some of you may recall when I was up for confirmation, all these Democratic senators saying how concerned they were about my adherence to the unitary executive theory.
Welcome back, America. That's Attorney General William Barr at the Federalist Society. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It's the Hillsdale Dialogue, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Dean Matthew Spalding is my guest. He is the dean of the graduate school that Hillsdale runs at the Kirby Center in Washington, D.C. Matt, I played all of Bill Barr's speech because it was so wonderful, but that's my favorite clip.
That was classic. And what's especially interesting about that is the whole bit about the movie Vice.
Yes.
Is actually not in his original text. That's off script.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's great. He's just riffing.
And so, explain to us his underlying point or emphasize it, because he explained it very well. But this craziness on the left permeates everything.
Well, first, let me say up front that I think this is not only a significant and important and great speech, but I think this speech is of a comparison to the speeches that Attorney General Ed Meese gave in the Reagan administration in the mid-'80s that picked a fight with Justice Brennan and actually started the debate, the modern debate on originalism. I think this is a very significant speech. The heart of the speech is to recover the idea of the executive power, and he does a number of things here, which we can talk about. But one thing I think he does very clearly is and here we see it in a very humorous way, he undermines this notion of the theory of the unitary president as if it was made up, which is, of course, the accusation of the left, made up sometime to justify executive power, which the Republican Party wants to use for nefarious purposes. But Attorney General Barr here clearly puts it in historical context. This is actually what comes out of the Constitutional Convention. This is what is created. Indeed, the creation of the executive in the American constitutional system, that thing to create an executive within constitutional government, to republicanize the executive, as Harvey Mansfield likes to say, that actually is a significant, a worldly, historical, significant thing that is accomplished in American constitutionalism. And Attorney General Barr says that that's actually the miracle that occurs here, is to contain the executive in the Constitution, but create a sufficiently powerful executive to do the things that executives need to do in terms of executing the law, in terms of doing sovereign functions, in terms of doing the things necessary to defend the country.
I'll be right back with Dean Spalding. We're going to stay on this. We are going to stay on this because the Bill Barr speech is, as Dean Spalding said, brilliant, necessary, deserving of the attention. The Hillsdale Dialogue continues on the Hugh Hewitt Show right after this.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hugh-niverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hugh-niverse.com.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
The implications of the framers' decision are obvious. If Congress attempts to vest the power to execute the law in someone beyond the control of the president, it contravenes the framers' clear intent to vest that power in a single person, the president. So much for this supposedly nefarious new theory of the unitary executive. Now, we all understand that the framers expected that the three branches would be jostling and jousting with each other as each threatened to encroach on the prerogatives of the others. They thought this was not only natural, but salutary, and they provisioned each branch with the wherewithal to fight and to defend itself in these interbranch struggles for power. So let me turn now to how the executive is presently faring in these interbranch battles. I'm concerned that the deck has become stacked against the executive, and that since the mid-'60s there's been a steady grinding down of the executive branch's authority that accelerated after Watergate. More and more, the president's ability to act in areas in which he has discretion has become smothered by the encroachments of the other branches.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That was Attorney General William Barr. It is the Hillsdale Dialogue, our weekly last radio hour. I'm joined today by Dean Matthew Spalding. He helms Hillsdale's Graduate School of Statesmanship in Washington, D.C. at the Kirby Center. Find out about it at hillsdale.edu. Dean Spalding, I should ask you, how has the semester gotten off to a start over there?
It's going great. We've got some students now. We just made some decisions for January for a new class. It's fabulous. We have great students from all sorts of places, and we're off to the races trying to save them.
I had Michael Anton on this week, and what a great faculty you have. And are you closed for January, or are you still taking applications?
No, we're set for January, and we're already talking to people about the fall.
All right. Now, let's go to what Attorney General Barr just said. The Constitution gave the unitary executive to the president. It has been under assault, as the Constitution intended, actually, by the judiciary and the Congress since the beginning. But the executive has not fought back very well since Watergate. What do you think of his analysis? What do you think of his prognosis? And what do you think of the likelihood of a successful rebound of the executive authority?
Well, I think his analysis of the scope of what has happened is absolutely correct. I think we can add to that, or at least expand on it a little bit, in the sense that what the modern kind of progressive transformation of government has really actually created a separate or a different constitutional regime. And he's representing one and criticizing the other. But the other has transformed all three of the branches such that today the Congress is actually, on the one hand, extremely weak because they've delegated a lot of their power to the executive, and they practice oversight over the executive. The executive, on the other hand, has become weakened when it comes to the core responsibility of the executive, yet stronger in a way because of the delegations of this bureaucratic power. And the courts, meantime, have become kind of a star chamber. The larger thing going on here is, twofold. One is because the courts have become so involved, which Attorney General Barr says is the prime source of the problem, they have intervened in the natural back and forth between the executive branch and the legislative branch. That deforms the constitutional separation of powers structure. But the rise of this new bureaucratic state, which we've already been alluding to, has created this other entity out there, which Congress has delegated and created and now practices oversight over, and that blurs the lines between the executive and the legislative branch. So there's this whole different way that government works that's the background to what he's raising here. In the midst of that, how do you restore executive power, by which we don't just mean a stronger executive per se, but an executive that is strong where they're supposed to be strong in their core functions. But in doing so, what you're actually talking about doing is restoring the proper role of the three branches of government. And he's focused here on the executive branch, which I think is especially in trouble given the other branches. I would emphasize that, actually Congress is actually in dire problems, deep problems as well. They're actually focusing on the wrong things. They're pursuing impeachment and in the Senate trying to block executive appointments as opposed to doing things like budgets. They're not sticking to their core functions either. So it's this larger thing that I think has greatly transformed it. In the midst of that, I think he is absolutely correct that the best way to revive these constitutional structures is to make each of the branches, in this case the executive, more robust in defending and asserting its core functions and powers.
Now, Matthew Spalding,
that's what he's focused on.
When you teach this speech, and I assume you will be teaching this speech, I think there's another point to be made that is subtle but important. As he attempts to revivify the executive and to energize the legislative branch towards its proper function, he's also talking to the judiciary. There are two ways to restore the judiciary. The first is direct. You make appointments, as President Trump has appointed 2 Supreme Court justices, 46 members of the federal appellate bench with another 6 coming. That will be 52 out of a total of 167. He will eventually appoint 1/3 in his first term, and he has now 120 district court judges appointed, approaching 1/4 of the district court judges. That's direct. Indirect, he is giving this speech to the Federalist Society. The Federalist Society is 30 years old. It grew up in response to the collapse of legal academia into leftward ideology. It grew up in the response to a judiciary out of control. It represents originalism and the Constitution. So that he gave this speech to this group at this time is incredibly significant to me in its symbolism and in what it is suggesting we need to do, which is to support and have the Federalist Society thrive. Your thoughts?
No, I think that's absolutely correct. I would take it a step further. And this is why I think the parallel to Attorney General Meese's speeches are so important. Attorney General Meese's speeches in the 80s brought into, I think, prominence, actually gave rise to the creation of the Federalist Society in the first place.
Yes.
The argument that we should focus on judges and their appointment. Absolutely correct, and I think for all the reasons you just laid out. Attorney General Barr here, in many ways, going to the Federalist Society, where those original Meese speeches were made in conjunction with, is actually, I think, arguing and suggesting we now need to turn to phase 2 of all of this. And the subtle thing I picked up on there is you're right. The direct way is judicial appointments, and we're going to continue doing that. Clearly they are. But he's actually raising this indirect idea, which is we actually need to revive the actual operational day-to-day separation of powers back and forth, where each branch is actually defending itself and pursuing its own functions, which is actually the Madisonian design of the Constitution. And in that context, you want a robust executive focused on executive powers. You actually want a robust legislative branch focused on appropriate legislative powers, not doing the silly things they tend to focus on. Here he talks about how they have become so focused on oversight. Well, that's because they delegated and created this bureaucracy, and they gave up on budgeting, so they do it after the fact by keeping an eye on the bureaucracy. The administrative state, this thing we are always talking about, has so deformed the branches that the way to get back to it is not merely to do the immediate things, but to actually revive that structure. And in the case of the court, you not only need good judges on the court, but I think you actually need a robust executive and a legislative branch, but an executive who will push the court by asserting their own powers. I mean, he raises this great question. I think he's absolutely right about this, about nationwide injunctions.
Let me play that.
Let me
play that. Cut number 28.
That's a real problem.
This is important. Cut 28 of Bill Barr's speech.
Courts' indulgence of such claims, even if they are ultimately rejected, represents a serious intrusion on the president's constitutional prerogatives. The impact of these judicial intrusions on the executive responsibility have been hugely magnified by another judicial innovation, the nationwide injunction. First used in 1963 and sparingly since then until recently, these court orders enjoin enforcement of a policy not just as to the parties before the court, but nationwide against everybody. Now, since President Trump has taken office, district courts have issued over 40 nationwide injunctions against the government. By comparison, during President Obama's first 2 years, district courts had issued 2 nationwide injunctions, both of which immediately vacated by the Ninth Circuit.
You see, Matthew, he understood exactly what you were getting at. He's challenging the judicial branch in his speech.
No, he is challenging the judicial branch, but he's challenging them in 2 ways. One, you guys should keep an eye on your own shop, which is you shouldn't be allowing lower court judges to stop the whole nation. It's destroying the very structure of the judiciary, the tiering, if you will, of how the court system works. That's one thing he's doing. But the other thing he's doing is he's putting a marker down here, which is that the executive, this is impinging upon the legitimate constitutional powers of the executive, and the executive, I actually think, has the authority to ignore a local district judge issuing a nationwide injunction. That's a more robust response, but I would actually suggest that would be a response consistent with a robust understanding of the separation of powers. Remember, in the speech just prior to those passages you were referring to, when he talks about the courts intervening between the executive and the legislative branch, he actually makes a very strong argument that courts, by themselves, can't resolve many of these disputes. These are political questions, and the courts need to, on the one hand, back off. But on the other hand, you need a robust executive and legislature to fight those political questions, and ultimately those political questions go to the American people, and we are back to our consent issue again. So
we will come back to that. We'll come back to that after the break. Matthew Spalding, Dean of the Hillsdale Graduate School in Washington, D.C., is my guest. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Go and support the college. Watch their amazing online courses and every one of our Hillsdale dialogues collected at hughforhillsdale.com. Next Friday, an Elliott epic. Also want to remind you the Red Kettle is open over at hughhewitt.com for the Salvation Army. Exiled from Chick-fil-A in an extraordinary, inexplicable, deeply disappointing action by Chick-fil-A. I shall not enter the restaurants again, but I have doubled, Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I have doubled our contribution to Salvation Army. The lost and the least need your help. Please step up and go to hughhewitt.com. Contribute to the Red Kettle at the top. While you're there, look for the relieffactor.com button as well. $19.95 gets you your starter pack of relieffactor.com. I was asked frequently last night, both Seb and I had our relief factor in our wallet, how do you keep up this schedule? Because it's been Tampa, Southern California, San Francisco, then back to D.C., then to Cleveland, back to D.C., and it's just because of relieffactor.com. Stay healthy, stay exercising, stay moving, and help support the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that comes with aging, exercise, or, in fact, airport travel. Relieffactor.com, $19.95 get you started. Come right back here, America, after the break. I'll be back for the last segment of this week's Hugh Hewitt Show with Dean Matthew Spalding of Hillsdale College, talking about impeachment when we return on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the movie in theaters today.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Matthew Spalding, Dean of the Hillsdale College Graduate School in Washington, D.C. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. I want to close by talking about impeachment. Historic week, Matthew Spalding. In 1974, Richard Nixon resigned before he was impeached. Now, he was weak. not only was there the bad things that had happened on his watch, but there was an economy that had fallen off the cliff, largely because of the high oil and gas prices that resulted because of the oil embargo when RN saved Israel in November of 1973. A 4% decline in GDP by August 1974. Also, Congress at the time had both parties, both houses of Congress controlled by huge majorities of Democrats, both of them. And then most importantly of all, I think, the media was completely united in parroting a narrative about Nixon, whereas Trump just went on this morning to Fox News and the president talked for 45 minutes making his case. He has a Twitter following. All of these allow him, I think, to survive easily an impeachment push. But I am worried that which gets reported gets repeated. Adam Schiff loved his TV time, even though I think Nancy Pelosi regrets it. Do you expect more partisan impeachments as a result?
Well, this is the underlying concern I have, especially as someone who takes the rule of law and the Constitution seriously, is we're undermining, which is also an important aspect of the Constitution, going back to our discussion about the executive, the idea of impeachment, the very process of impeachment within the Constitution, as opposed to taking them out, the monarch out and cutting their head off, is a very important thing. And I think we are watering it down so much by making it blatantly partisan in a way that precedent, I think, will be very dangerous. That's not what the founders intended. They were against maladministration. So I think the dilemma now is what does the Senate do? This is why I've been going back and reading a lot about Senate history of trials and rules and procedures. And and you had a great column the other day about, look, you either can dismiss the thing and get rid of it right away, or you're going to have this trial, which allows them to make their case in front of the Senate. What I'm worried about is setting, if the Senate cannot and should not, for constitutional reasons, set the precedent that a hyper-partisan impeachment has to go through the full Senate in a way that I think would create a precedent, but establish that a president can be impeached for policy and partisan disagreements. And I think that's extremely dangerous. And I think there is an alternative here that they could pursue that prevents them from going that way.
Let me ask you, Matthew, about that, because a member of the Senate staff called me up and said the standing rules of impeachment do not have the option of dismissing at the motion to proceed, which is what I've been urging, to which I responded, under the Reed rule, the standing rules of the Senate and the standing rules of the Senate regarding impeachment can be modified by a simple majority vote to establish a procedure for dismissal of purely partisan impeachments. And that's what I think they ought to do. They said that's not what Mitch McConnell's going to do. He doesn't like to change the rules, only when the Democrats have done so prior to it, and they did that on nominations. And I think here history urges it upon the Senate Majority Leader to change the rules to allow for dismissal. What do you think?
I think they need to do something to get around this, but I'm not sure that they need to change the rules, because there's the Senate standing rules, but there are also particular rules having to do with impeachment trials. Now, one of the problems, I think this is where McConnell is also thinking, is a number of people have made it very clear that there aren't votes for dismissal right away, at least not right now. So taking a dismissal vote and it having failed means you're off to the races. The idea I have in the procedures of the impeachment procedures, and history is clearly on our side, is that several times going back to 1804 with Pickering, but also put into the rules in the 1930s and then used extensively in the 80s, the Senate can immediately order a committee, a committee to gather evidence and consider whether that evidence is legitimate for going forward. At that point, that committee could come back and the Senate could dismiss it for lack of evidence. There's a way to do this if they want to not merely go on to the droning along of an impeachment trial. Remember, the other problem with an impeachment trial is senators sit there in the hands and can only write down questions. If you take it to a committee to collect evidence, you can actually dismiss that rule, which has been done before in other cases, such that senators can actually cross-examine and they can call witnesses. So all those witnesses that were not allowed in the House procedure can now be brought forward under the Senate committee, so that then goes forward. And then the Senate can decide whether we should actually have a trial.
Under the standing rules as they exist today?
If you read the procedures, it's clearly allowed. They've done these committees many times before.
Oh, yes. Elsie Hastings. Yeah. Nixon, Judge Nixon.
And there's no language in here that says it cannot be used in the case of a presidential impeachment. Nothing at all. There's no reason why you couldn't do that.
Wouldn't it be great to have a select committee with Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley,
precisely.
Ben Sass?
And then after you go through that, then are they going to dismiss? I would argue they would probably, because you bring in more witnesses and you show this for what it is, a partisan impeachment.
Hunter Biden, the whistleblower, Chalupa, all on the table. Matthew Spalding, Dean Spalding of the Hillsdale Graduate School of Government. Thank you, my friends. Thank you to everyone here in Cleveland at WHK Radio, 1420 The Answer. Thanks for everyone who came out last night. Thanks for everyone contributing to Salvation Army. Thanks to Adam, Ben, and Dwayne. And I will talk to you on Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Salvation Army.